I'm OneArmTop, and this is my tier list for off-meta top lane picks. I drew the cutoff at any champion played less than 1.5% of the time in top lane, so some champions that go top secondary, like Yasuo, are actually still played more than any other champ on this tier list, so I'm not quite calling him off-meta, even if top lane's not his main role. I'll start by putting one champion in each category and explaining what that tier means and why that champion fits there. So my first champion is the easiest champ in out of all of these to categorize. It's Cassiopeia. She goes right into the sweaty tier because she takes just nonstop focus. She's one of the highest APM champions in the game. If you don't start the game sweaty, you're going to finish pretty sweaty. Then Heimerdinger is going to be the first champion for the One Trick Maniac tier. This tier doesn't necessarily mean you're a good player, but it does mean that you're a maniac. If you're playing Heimerdinger, my assumption is that you don't play any other champion ever. You actually understand all of Heimerdinger's abilities, how to trigger whatever you want out of your towers, and you're clinically insane. Then Vayne, I'm going to put in the autofilled tier. I have a decent amount of respect for people who do champions like Vayne top. I know that it's easy to hate on ranged champs in the top lane, but I think that sometimes they do better there than in their main role. And when I switched to top lane, I was coming from AD carry. So when I was in a tough matchup, I would fall back on Vayne all the time. And I haven't really played her in over a year, but she belongs in the autofill tier for me because I don't think that you're a true top laner if you're playing her a lot, but that doesn't mean you can't succeed with her. Then Zach is going to go in the peak fun tier. Somehow his win rate's super high, but it's a tiny sample size. I think that Zach top can fit really well into certain comps, and other times it means that your team has no damage. But he's a really fun champ. You can engage from like 2 screens away. He's good to roam on. You can tank for 30 seconds in a fight. I think that he's a lot of fun. And then my first champion for the no tier is Zed. Don't play him top. It's bad. It doesn't work. I don't like it. uh, so those are the 5 tiers, and they're roughly in order of likelihood of winning. So if you're playing a sweaty champ, I think that I think you're gonna win. And if you're playing a no champ, I think you're probably gonna lose. And then the others fall somewhere in between. So I would put Warwick in the One Trick Maniac tier. I don't really think the people who are playing Warwick are autofilled junglers. I think that they're people who love Warwick Top's play style. And since he's kind of a unique champion with his barrier cheese and everything else about him as a top laner, I would say more people one trick him than most champs. Tom Kench is going to be peak fun for a lot of the same reasons as Zach. You're basically playing a mini game of stacking heart steel and doing a surprising amount of damage for somebody who's so tanky. I've had a lot of fun on him, and I actually have a pretty good win rate on him, despite me putting him in the fun tier. Udyr is going to be a no for me. I don't think he's ever been that good of a top laner. I know that you can really surprise people with your damage, and that goes for both old Udyr and new Udyr. He does more damage than people expect, and sometimes he has 700 movement speed and nobody can touch him. But I just feel like if he goes down 1 kill, he will never ever be useful. And for most champions, there's a way back into the game. For Udyr, I don't see that happening. Maokai, I'm going to say, is probably a lot of autofilled players. He's a relatively easy champion to get something done on. I'm not saying he doesn't have a high skill ceiling, but he's got a pretty low skill floor. It's easy to do the basics on Maokai. And whether you're a support or a jungler, I think that you can translate pretty well into playing Maokai top. Akshan, I'm going to say, is sweaty because you never turn your brain off when you're playing him. And maybe I'm giving range champs too much respect in this tier list, but you're just always doing something. You're making choices with pretty much every single auto attack. You're constantly having to space well so you don't get jumped on. And you have to choose every single time you back, do I want to go to lane or do I want to roam? Because you have so much ability to impact the rest of the map. And I put Akshan in a previous tier list as one of the least fun champions to play against. So I'm not saying that I like him. I'm not saying he's good for League, but I do think that if you're playing him, you're pretty likely to win and you're a pretty sweaty player, for better or worse. Swain, I'm also going to put in the sweaty tier. If you're playing Swain, it's the same thing. You're always doing something. You always have to look at the map, decide where to go next. It's not just show up to lane, scale, hope that late game goes well, hope your bot lane wins. It's constant action. Trundle, I'll put in the autofill tier. I feel like that's just what junglers do or what somebody who hasn't played top lane since season 4 would do. He's got a lot of great things. He can take towers in 2 seconds, but he just doesn't really fit in the top lane meta right now. And I don't think that a lot of top laners actually main him or pick him that often. Wukong, I'll say, is peak fun. He just reminds me of like old school League. He hasn't really been meta in a long time, and I feel like the last time he was meta was as a jungler rather than a top laner. But I always have fun with him. There's a lot of cool tricks he can do. The double alt cast makes him pretty fun. Shyvana is going to be in the no tier, which is a little bit funny because like 3 weeks ago I made a video where I'm just going nuts on Shyvana, but she took some massive nerfs since then. So I just no longer think that she's worth playing. I hope that she gets reworked soon because she's not that good as a jungler. She's even worse as a top laner after the last nerfs. Vladimir was a bit of a tough champ to decide. It was either going to be Sweaty or One Trick Maniac, and I'm going to put him in the One Trick Maniac tier. He's a true 1v9 champ, and I don't think a bunch of casual players pick him up now and then. I think it's Vlad players play Vlad, and that's it. He's crazy. I don't really know how he's balanced, but Vladimir players tend to be really good at him. Rengar, this one I'm also not super confident in, but I'm gonna put him in the sweaty tier. It falls back to if you're always doing something, I think that it's kind of a sweaty champ. And when I look at the Rengars who get like 12 bush jumps on the first 2 minions, I'm like, calm down, stop doing that. I'm not even trying to hit you. Stop jumping. You're not filling your whatever the resource is called bar. Calm down. I don't really like Rengar as a champion. I think that they're pretty sweaty. And then Kennen, I'm gonna say no for. He's different than the other champions in this no tier because he's usually like in the back of the meta for pro play. Sometimes he's at the front of the meta, but he's usually viable in pro play. And I just don't think that he's very viable in solo queue. People do weird stuff, but I don't think that he gets wins. I think he has a great time until level 6 when he's just auto attacking people. And sometimes he can have game changing ults, but I just see it less with him than with other champs. I think there's a lot of champs who can do what Kennen does, but better. And for Rise, I'll put him in One Trick Maniac. I don't know if there's any OG Rise players left after his like 6 reworks, but he's actually in a pretty healthy spot right now. He finally has a reasonable win rate, and for some reason he doesn't dominate pro play, but he's doing fine in solo queue, which is pretty backwards from usual. Anyway, I think he's a pretty good champ, but I think that he's mostly just played by one tricks. So that's my tier list for off meta champions. I covered most of the top picks that are played less than 1.5% of the time. But if you have any questions about how I feel for other champions, feel free to ask in the comments. And thank you for watching.